way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but freed people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay?
Come on.
You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations.
I had no idea that church I was running by every day was something my grandfather established.
This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million. And then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Overnight, it's like, oh, it's no longer the quarters, now it's Lincoln Heights. Oh, so now we get to use Abraham Lincoln for our name. And you think about all the other people that they could have used, but they picked Lincoln. And I think that's sort of a stereotypical of what they do.
There wasn't any black restaurants. As far as black business and weed, it wasn't none.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Why has it been easier for other groups than us?
Because of anti-black hatred.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR rules, don't tune in.
Welcome everyone. This is Emend, the Mass Media Group. And today we're going to be talking about no pensions for ex-slaves and how the federal agencies suppress movement and aid freed people. So thank you for joining live right now, 6 p.m., June 13th, 2023. And for those who will be reviewing this on the replay, we appreciate you and thank you for your time. But before we actually start the presentation, there's some housekeeping that I think we should do. All right. So for those who don't know yet, on June 29th at 9 a.m., that's usually the time what happens. It hasn't been exactly confirmed, but most likely it will be 9 a.m. on June 29th, 2023. That's a Thursday, right here in Sacramento, California. There will be the 16th California Reparations Task Force meeting. As usual, you can check more information out at the DOJ, the California DOJ website for more information. And you can also tune in live, right, on the Emend, the Mass Media Group YouTube channel. We plan on being in the building. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, if you're anywhere near and around Sacramento, come through. Matter of fact, we will be out at our local Juneteenth festival festivities this weekend on Saturday, June 17th, to hand out these flyers and try to get as many people in the building as possible. We need to show up for this final hearing in droves. So come through if you can.
Yeah, and also just wanted to give some shout outs to our fellow comrades at CJEC, ARC Sacramento and ARC Bay Area, and NAASD, and our CLBS in San Bernardino, I believe, and Politics in Black. So shout out to our family.
CJEC family. Shout out.
So yeah, so if you haven't subscribed or joined up with the newsletter at CJEC, definitely join there to get the latest reparations information, as well as like, share, and subscribe right here on Emend Mass Media Group.
Yep.
So the big reveal, well, the quiet big reveal. It's a big test. reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. You can right now, as we speak, right now, be the first one or many to pre-order the documentary, which will be released on 6/19, better known as Juneteenth. Hit that QR code right there on the screen. Go to reparationsnowdoc.com. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and put that in the chat so you can get a direct link to that. We really appreciate the support. I think we worked little diligent going up from Weed all the way down to San Diego on this documentary. So
yeah, I learned a lot. So, hopefully, can tune in on Juneteenth, watch it on the actual day of this commemoration. It would mean a lot to us, fam.
Yeah, definitely. So after you get done with your Juneteenth, you're going outside with your family and friends, so forth. Sit back, get your popcorn, your libations, and soak in that information. Yeah, the website is looking good, looking sharp. So go ahead and hit that QR code. That's reparationsnow.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. All right, so I know we got some more news before we start. So PrecisionDiet.com, I know pretty much nobody knows, but actually this is a group that me and my father, I'm actually a musician and artist as well as being a multimedia producer. Man, me and my pops haven't put out an album in like years upon years. I was in Los Angeles for most of the time, and so when I moved back up to Sac, we linked up. And most of the music is actually in the soundtrack of the Reparations Now documentary. So our first track that we're soon to be, it's actually technically released now, so it's probably everywhere. But we haven't really promoted that because we've been focusing, or at least I should say, I've been focusing more on, trying to work on this reparations side of things. So
I think that's been a full-time job.
Oh yeah, facts. So I think when the report comes out, I can start focusing more on the music side. But in the interim, family, go check out. It might even be on what are those, the ones out there? iTunes. You got what is that, Kim?
Spotify.
Spotify, thank you. That's how much I really don't care. But it's everywhere, basically streaming, download. You can check it out. So the track is called "Welcome to California" with
KKK.
KKK. And I know we got some other stuff in the building that we're doing right now. Well, that's afterwards.
Well, what other stuff in the building are we
preview.
doing?
Is that it? I thought we had, or no?
That's
I guess
all
that's it,
I
right?
see.
Is that it?
I think
okay.
so.
I think that is. Okay, I thought we had. Yes, that is it. Okay, so we're actually going to get started here on the presentation. So sit back, relax. It's probably 20 minutes to 30 minutes.
Yeah, so grab a libation, get comfortable, kick up your feet.
Exactly. All right, so let me go ahead and cue this up right now.
YouTube and chill.
Yeah, YouTube and chill. All right. Let's go ahead. All right, let's see if we can remove the cover, and then we'll start it up. All right, here we go. A federal agency suppressed movement to aid freed. No pension for ex-slaves. A federal agency suppressed movement to aid freed people. By Miranda Booker Perry. The Union victory in the Civil War helped pave the way for the 13th Amendment. A quick side note. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. The amendment was passed by the Senate on April 8, 1864, by the House of Representatives on January 31, 1865, and ratified by December 6, 1865, and proclaimed on December 18th. So the question is, has slavery really been abolished? According to a 2021 CNN article, Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans, according to a report by the Sentencing Project. The report found that 1 in 81 black adults per 100,000 people in the United States is serving time in a state prison, using data and projections from recent years from the U.S. Census, the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, and information provided directly from some states. Let's continue. To formally abolish the practice of slavery in the United States, but following their emancipation, most former slaves had no financial resources, property, residence, or education. The keys to their economic independence. Efforts to help them achieve some semblance of economic freedom, such as with 40 acres and a mule, were stymied. Without federal land compensation or any compensation, many ex-slaves were forced into sharecropping, tenancy farming, convict leasing, or some form of menial labor arrangements aimed at keeping them economically subservient and tied to land owned by former slaveholders. The property which afflicted them for a generation after emancipation held them down to the lowest order of society, nominally free but economically enslaved, wrote Carter G. Woodson in The Miseducation of the Negro in the 1930s. In the late 19th century, the idea of pursuing pensions for ex-slaves, similar to pensions for Union veterans, took hold. If disabled elderly veterans were compensated for their years of service during the Civil War, why shouldn't former slaves who had served the country in the process of nation building be compensated for their years of forced, unpaid labor? By 1899, about 21% of the black population nationally had been born into slavery. According to historian Mary Frances Berry, had the government distributed pensions to former slaves and their caretakers near the turn of the century, there would have been a relatively modest number of people to compensate. But the movement to grant pensions to ex-slaves faced strong opposition, and the strongest came not from Southerners in Congress, but from the 3 executive branch agencies. It was opposition impossible to overcome. Land allocation efforts stymied by the Johnson administration. In the late stages of the Civil War and in its aftermath, the federal government, primarily Republicans, tried to relieve destitution among freed people and help them gain economic independence through attempts to allocate land. These efforts, both militarily and legislative, helped explain why African Americans thought that compensation was attainable. Special Field Orders Number 15, issued by General William T. Sherman in January 1865, promised 40 acres of abandoned and confiscated land in South Carolina, Georgia, and northern Florida, largely the Sea Islands and coastal lands that had previously belonged to Confederates, to freed people. Sherman also decided to loan mules to former slaves who settled the land. But these efforts were rolled back by President Andrew Johnson's amnesty proclamation of May 29, 1865. By the latter part of 1865, thousands of free people were abruptly evicted from land that had been distributed to them through Special Field Orders Number 15. Circular Number 15, issued by the Freedmen's Bureau on September 12, 1865, coupled with Johnson's presidential pardons, provided for restoration of land to former owners, with the exception of a small number who had legal land titles. Freed people were removed from the land as a result of President Johnson's restoration program. The Freedmen's Bureau Act had been established by Congress in March 1865 to help former slaves transition from slavery to freedom. Section 4 of the Act authorized the Bureau to rent no more than 40 acres of confiscated or abandoned land to freed people and loyal white refugees for a term of 3 years. At the end of the term, or at any point during the term, the male occupants renting the land had the option to purchase it and would then receive a title to the land. But Johnson's restoration policy rendered Section 4 null and void and seriously thwarted Bureau officials' efforts to help the newly emancipated acquired land. In June 1866, the Southern Homestead Act was enacted. It was designed to exclusively give freed people and white Southern loyalists first choice of the remaining public lands from 5 Southern states until January 1, 1867. But homesteading was problematic on many different levels. The short period allotted by Congress, 6 months, worked against freed people because most were under contract to work or had leased land through the Bureau's contract labor policy until the end of the year. Congress also underestimated the time it would take for freedmen and loyal whites to successfully complete the process of securing a homestead. This process involved filing claims, waiting indefinitely until offices opened or reopened, and working to secure enough money to purchase land. Currently, freed people faced Southern white opposition to settling land. Moreover, Congress provided no tools, seed, rations, or any form of additional assistance to freed people, and most freed people's earnings just covered the bare necessities of life. Maintaining a homestead without assistance was almost impossible under those circumstances. March 11, 1867, House Speaker Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania introduced a bill, H.R. 29, that outlined a plan for confiscated land in the, quote, Confederate States of America, end quote. Section 4 of the proposed bill explicitly called for land to be distributed to former slaves. Out of the lands of the season confiscated, the slaves who had been liberated by the operations of the war and the amendment of the Constitution or otherwise, who resided in said Confederate States on the 4th day of March, A.D. 1861 or since, shall have distributed to them as follows, namely, to each male person who is the head of a family, 40 acres, to each adult male, whether the head of the family or not, 40 acres to each widow, who is the head of a family, 40 acres to be held by them in fee simple. But to the inalienable for the next 10 years after they become seized thereof, at the end of 10 years, the absolute title to said homesteads shall be conveyed to said owners or to the heirs of such as they are then dead. Stevens knew that if federal land redistribution legislation failed to pass, freed people would be at the whim of former slaveholders for years to come. In support of his bill, he stated, withhold them all their rights, and leave them destitute of the means of earning a livelihood. And they will become the victims of the hatred or cupidity of the rebels whom they helped to conquer. Republicans during the 1868 campaign even promised 40 acres and a mule to freed people. A couple of decades passed before any further concerted efforts were made to provide economic relief and security for ex-slaves. And when there was another major effort, it was not by the government, but by former slaves and their allies. Ex-slave pension movement begins as the century ends. By the last decade of the 19th century, the idea of trying to procure the enactment of pension legislation for ex-slaves for their years of unpaid labor was put into action. The concept of ex-slave pensions was modeled after the Civil War era program of military service pensions. In the first ex-slave pension bill, H.R. 11119, that's 11119, was introduced by Republican William Connell of Nebraska in 1890. It was introduced at the request of Walter R. Vaughn of Omaha, a white Democrat and ex-mayor of Council Bluffs, Iowa. He did not believe that it or subsequent bills should be identified as a pension bill, but instead as a, quote, Southern tax relief bill, end quote. Vaughn recognized that pensions would financially benefit former slaves and would indeed be a semblance of justice for their years of forced labor. But the outcome he looked for involved ex-slaves spending their pensions in the South in order to give the devastated Southern economy a financial boost. The push for ex-slave pensions gained momentum in the 1890s and continued into the early 20th century. This grassroots movement was composed largely of former slaves, their family members, and friends. It emerged during the nadir of American race relations, roughly 1877 into the early 20th century. Racial segregation officially became the law of the land with the U.S. Supreme Court's 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which upheld racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. Lynchings and race riots were at an all-time high, while civil rights and legal recourse for blacks were virtually non-existent. Throughout the South, black men were disenfranchised and could not serve on juries. The pension movement flourished in spite of, or even because of, these obstacles. There were a number of ex-slave pension organizations within the movement: the National Ex-Slave Pension Club Association of the United States, Vaughn's Justice Party, the Ex-Slave Petitioners Assembly, the Great National Ex-Slave Union, Congressional Legislative and Pension Association of the USA, the Ex-Slave Pension Association, the Ex-Slave Department Industrial Association of America, and others. But there is a paucity of documentation for groups other than the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty and Pension Association of the United States of America, MRB, and PA. The ex-slave pension organizations did not work together collectively, but there is evidence that officers of at least a few of these organizations were interested in joining forces and consolidating their groups. The MRB and PA was chartered on August 7, 1897, and had a dual mission: to petition Congress for the passage of legislation that would grant compensation to ex-slaves, particularly elderly ex-slaves, and to provide mutual aid and burial expenses. The association collected membership fees in order to help defray lobbying costs, printing, publication expenses, and travel expenses of the national officers. Monthly dues were reserved for mutual aid purposes, to aid the sick, the disabled, and for burial expenses. Ex-slaves and their allies gave their meager resources to help further the movement because they believed in the organization's mission. Dedication and charisma characterized the leaders of the association and enabled them to mobilize the masses. By the late 1890s, the MRB and PA was the premier ex-slave pension organization. claiming a membership in the hundreds of thousands. In addition to having a strong grassroots following, the MRB in PA was highly organized. The national officers established a charter, drafted a constitution and bylaws, held annual conventions, formed an executive board, started local chapters, mostly in the South and Midwest, established enrollment fees and dues, advertised through circulars and broadsides, and advocated unity of purpose. The organization supported a proposed pension payment scale based upon the age of beneficiaries that appeared in every ex-slave bill from 1899 onward. Ex-slaves 70 years and older at the time of disbursement were to receive an initial payment of $500 and $15 a month for the rest of their lives. Those aged 60 to 69 years old would receive $300 and $12 a month. Those aged 50 to 59 years old would receive $100 and $8 a month. And those under 50 will receive a $4 a month pension. If formerly enslaved persons were either very old or too ill to care for themselves, their caretakers were to be compensated. Once a freed person reached a certain age threshold, he or she would then be eligible for their higher pension. This proposed ex-slave pension payment scale is very similar to the Civil War pension graduation scale for soldiers with disabilities. Soldiers who became disabled as a result of military service received pension payments based on the nature of their partial disability and military rank. Over time, the Civil War pension program came to resemble a system of pensions for elderly veterans, just as the ex-slave pension movement's main focus was to secure pensions to particularly aid the elderly. The association's headquarters was in Nashville, Tennessee, where two of its most notable leaders, Isaiah H. Dickerson and Callie D. House, lived. Dickerson, an educator and minister, was the general manager and national promoter of the organization. House, a widow, laundress, mother of 5, and former slave, was elected as assistant secretary of the association in November 1898. She soon became a national promoter of the movement alongside Dickerson. As the association's membership grew, government surveillance intensified. However, Dickerson, House, and other association officers were not aware of the federal government's intense interest in their organization and plans to undermine it and the larger movement. Association faces strong opposition to pensions from U.S. government. 3 federal agencies, the Bureau of Pensions, the Post Office Department, and the Department of Justice, worked collectively in the late 1890s and into the early 20th century to investigate individuals and groups in the movement. The officials who pursued the investigations thought the idea of pensioning ex-slaves was unrealistic because the government had no intention of compensating former slaves for their years of involuntary labor. Harrison Barrett, the acting assistant attorney general for the Post Office Department, admitted in an 1899 circular that there has never been the remotest prospect that the bill would become a law. In a February 7, 1902 letter to the Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Commissioner of Pensions blamed the ex-slave pension organizations for arousing false hopes for, quote, reparation for historical wrongs to be followed by inevitable disappointment and probably distrust of the dominant race and of the government, end quote. Special examiners of the Law Division of the Bureau of Pensions attended Slave Pension Association meetings, took depositions from officers, national and local, and sent letters to officers and members to determine if officers were representing themselves as officials appointed by the United States government. The Bureau of Pensions also sent circulars to agents affiliated with various ex-slave pension organizations. Although these circulars usually carried the disclaimer, while any class of citizens has an unquestioned right to associate for the purpose of attempting to secure legislation believed to be advantageous, these words were often simply a formality. The Bureau's inspectors did not find evidence to incriminate any of the influential MRB and PA officers whom they suspected of fraud. The Post Office Department took action when it presumed that the U.S. mails were being used to defraud ex-slaves. The Post Office used its extensive anti-fraud powers against the movement, issuing fraud orders to organized and officers. On September 20th, 1899, Barrett issued a fraud order against the MRB, NPA, and its national officers Dickerson, Reverend D.D. McNary, Reverend N. Smith, Reverend H. Head, and House, forbidding the delivery of all mail matter and the payment of money orders. Once the mail was intercepted, it was either returned to senders marked, quote, fraudulent, end quote, or simply withheld from the intended recipients. The fraud order and obstruction of mail proceeded even though the post office had no concrete evidence that the association had acted illegally. In letters to both Barrett and Nashville Postmaster A.W. Willis Dickerson, House and other officers invoked their First Amendment rights, namely their right to assemble and right to petition the government, 14th and 15th Amendment rights, citizenship rights, and voting rights, and highlighted the dire condition of old ex-slaves. In both correspondence and depositions, national and state officers of the MRB and PA also repeatedly denied the accusation that the movement was fraudulent or a lottery. They even hired an attorney to represent them and try to get the fraud order revoked. These efforts were futile. The Post Office Department was determined to maintain the fraud order set in motion in 1899 against the association and its founding officers and was continually searching for ways to limit their influence. The Department of Justice gathered information to probe the activities of the officers, especially House, not to counteract any fraudulent beliefs. The MRB and PA provided the department with a list of local agents in order to show that they were not a sham organization, but the government disregarded this proof. There were individuals who, under the guise of supporting the movement, took advantage of ex-slaves. They were either affiliated with an ex-slave organization or pretended to be affiliated with the movement to swindle money. To counter any misuse of funds within their organization, the MRB and PA had a grievance committee that would determine if an officer was guilty of squandering funds, and it took necessary action against him or her. The goal of the investigations by the Bureau of Pensions, Post Office Department, and Justice Department was not to determine whether former slaves had a legitimate grievance or claim, but to stifle the movement. The pension bills submitted to Congress received little serious attention. The Senate Committee on Pensions examined S-1176, a bill essentially similar in language to all of the other bills, and wrote an adverse report. This committee received its information and thus a tainted view of the movement from none other than the Post Office Department and the Commissioner of Pensions. The report described freed people in the movement as ignorant and credulous freedmen. And the committee concluded that, quote, this measure is not deserving of serious consideration by Congress, end quote, and recommended its indefinite postponement. When House learned of the committee's report, she drafted a letter to the Commissioner of Pensions refuting its allegations and explaining the objectives of the association. She invoked both the Declaration of Independence and U.S. Constitution, because one of the main objectives of the association was petitioning Congress for pensions to aid old ex-slaves. House reminded the commissioner that, quote, the Constitution of the United States grants its citizens the privilege to petition Congress for a redress of grievances. Therefore, I can't see where we have violated any law whatever. In 1901, Dickerson was found guilty of swindling in city court in Atlanta, Georgia. The press reported that he would have to pay a $1,000 fine or be sentenced to 1 year on the chain gang. The conviction was overturned later that year by the Georgia State Supreme Court, which reasoned that in order to be convicted of swindling, Dickerson would have had to have claimed that an ex-slave pension bill had passed and become law, or that an appropriation had been made to pay pensions, and not simply that he was advocating for the passage of pension legislation. Then in May 1902, a special examiner of the Bureau of Pensions conducted an inquiry into Dickerson and drafted an affidavit of the investigation, but found nothing incriminating. When Dickerson died in 1909, House soon became the leader in the forefront of not only the MRB and PA, but of the movement. After Congress responded so unfavorably to the pension movement, House took the issue to the courts. In 1915, the association filed a class action lawsuit in federal court for a little over $68 million against the U.S. Treasury. The lawsuit claimed that this sum, collected between 1862 and 1868 as a tax on cotton, was due the appellants because the cotton had been produced by them and their ancestors as a result of their, quote, involuntary servitude, end quote. The Johnson versus McAdoo cotton tax lawsuit is the first documented African American reparations litigation in the United States on the federal level. Predictably, the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia denied their claim based on governmental immunity, and the U.S. Supreme Court on Appeal sided with the lower court decision. The Post Office Department was unrelenting as it continued to search for means to limit House's influence and curtail the movement. After a prolonged investigation, House was arrested and indicted on charges of mail fraud. She was accused of sending misleading circulars through the mail, guaranteeing pensions to association members, and profiting from the movement. She denied ever assuring members that the government would grant pensions or that a law had been passed providing pensions for ex-slaves. There was also no evidence that she profited from the movement. The post office identified activities as mail fraud without definitive evidence, and their decisions to deny use of the mails were nearly impossible to appeal. After a 3-day trial in September 1917, an all-white male jury convicted her of mail fraud charges, and she was sentenced to a year in jail at the Missouri State Prison in Jefferson City. She was released from prison in August 1918, having served the majority of her sentence, with the last month commuted. This movement, against insurmountable odds, pressed for the passage of pension legislation to no avail, but being labeled as fraudulent, especially by determined federal agencies, sealed its fate.
That's all? That's all? So what happened? What happened? How did we get our pensions?
How do we get our pensions? I tell you where the pensions went. Not in our pockets.
I mean, but when did they? I mean, there has to be some resolution to this. I mean,
yeah, it's called the current day reparations.
Wow. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I don't know. I mean, family, for me, it's like things haven't really changed that much.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's the same way I feel with reparations now, the documentary, when we were producing that, it was just like every story just shows you the more things supposedly change, the more they stay the same. So.
Yeah. Yep. Fact. So do you want to put up that slide, a real quick slide, and then we'll
slide. Okay.
Oh, the other one.
Oh.
About the 3 points. But we like that one too. All right. So I don't know, family, in the chat or in the replay, if you guys want to put comments as well after the replay down in the description or description. So I could be wrong, but I would say my main takeaways is, the U.S. Congress's complicity in this endeavor with the reparations movement.
Right. As citizens, they were well within their rights to petition Congress.
Absolutely. I just didn't know how much the U.S. Post Office's complicity was involved with it, actually, until doing this research, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's
No.
one of those things where they just crippled the whole movement because, that was the only way to, get things move around at the time. So by them claiming fraud, that pretty much shut everything down.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the U.S. Post Office needs to come up off some reparations too. I know right now we're in California, we're concentrating on the state level. But in terms of federal, yep, the post office, they got to come up off, cut that check. And then it did mention a case. Looks like it was the first reparations case.
The tax
Johnson,
lawsuit, the cotton
the
tax
cotton tax
lawsuit.
lawsuit. Yeah, Johnson versus McAdoo.
Mm.
I thought that was very interesting and
Yeah.
poignant. How on certain levels, this has been going on, since Reconstruction. Yet every time that we've tried to, as American citizens, try to get redress, it always seems to be thwarted, by some other, entities, especially in this case being unfortunately, our own American government,
Right. So that's definitely a takeaway. I'd say a fourth takeaway here is, the passage that you read about if you, leave the ex-slaves kind of to their own devices without undergirding them for, prosperity or success, that they're going to be left to the left to these diabolical races, and that's exactly what happened, and it's still happening. So they called it.
Definitely. And shout out to Chairperson Camille Moore, who's actually in the building. We appreciate all the work that you do. And, if there's some other information that we need to know about this Johnson versus McAdoo case, family, definitely let us know. Actually, as a matter of fact, Kim, I think we actually should read the case on the platform.
Yeah.
I think we should actually read the case because on this channel, we try to be informative as best as we can. So
yeah, that goes back far. But yeah, I think that'd be worth a read. And the HR 29, you also mentioned was the bill that was supposed to give back the land.
Yep. A lot of bills, but no action. So,
right.
So what we're for this upcoming, June 29th, we're definitely looking forward to the final report and seeing what the next steps are, with legislation. Because, whatever happens in the future, it's got to happen in the near future. I think I put up a short, if people haven't seen it yet. We went out to, and I want to give a shout out to Kim Mims, who I was running a little late that day, so she actually covered most of the camera on her Emmy award-winning camera work that you do every time that we go out. So, including on the California Reparations Task Force. So, she captured an elder, a wise elder, and he was explaining how he feels that he just doesn't want this legislation just to be kicking down the road. So I thought that was a very impactful comment that he made. Because we, our community is like hurting. I know some of us think we aren't, but when you look at the wealth gap and a lot of the things that we're in the interim report, and then we'll be coming out in the final report, I mean, it's just evidence upon evidence upon evidence.
Yeah, and not only does he not want this to keep kicking it down the road, but he is very skeptical, and rightfully so, that it might just be another, I don't know, appeasement of some sort that will not go anywhere.
Yeah, that's why we're just trying to stay focused. I know there's a lot of information, or better yet, misinformation in the media right now. So, we're just trying to present information that is true, factual, and for those who are following the reparations task force, just stay focused. We really got to just stay focused, the eyes on the prize. And we got to resurrect this Freedmen's office and agency in all states, and in particular on the federal level, because, as we said plenty of times on this platform, it just got decimated, as it briefly talked about that in the presentation that I read. So it's crazy. I'm going to read this quote from a good dear sister, Camila Moore. She says, this article cuts against the statute of limitations. Conservatives' argument of reparations was noble idea 158 years ago. Your enslaved ancestors should have fought for it then. Well, they did.
Exactly.
Man, okay, hold on a second. Okay, we're going to do this. Because when somebody throws some like firebomb stuff at, oh my gosh, hold on a second. Here we go. Let me see if I can find it. All right, here we go.
So the people that are making these statements, are they that ignorant of history?
Yeah.
These are our elected officials. I mean, that's scary.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here, right? And others trying to figure out this puzzle, this history that's been hidden. I know, just to be honest with you, I had, in the past couple years, being involved in trying to understand this whole reparations thing. Like, a lot of this stuff just wasn't taught in school.
Not at all. Not at all. Or really talked about. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else's family, but in my family, I mean, reparations wasn't discussed. I think I had one conversation with my mom, and that was just came up because of in the credits of the Spike Lee movie, and I'm like, 40 acres and a mule, and she was just like, 40 acres and a mule. And I was like, what? And she was like, started explaining it. I was like, okay, well, what happened? She was like, they're never going to give it to us. They're never going to give it to us. And then that was the end of the conversation. Never brought up reparations again. And yeah.
Well, there you go.
So another thing that Chris talked about at the community session that we were at is that, you do have to have the faith and believe in this in order for, to make it happen. And I think that's just what the older generation, a lot of them just didn't believe. They just didn't believe that it would ever happen.
And I think one of the reasons why is, a lot of people just aren't informed. Like, for example, when we went up to Stockton, I spoke with some brothers, and, they was getting their chicken wangs on. And, as I approached them, actually, as a matter of fact, after they got done with the presentation, they was like, yo, what's up, man? I got a question. I was like, okay, what's up? So we, started talking, and I said, hey, have you guys heard of the Freedmen's Bureau? And like, they were like, nah, what's that about? So, and I'm assuming that these brothers was probably in their early 30s, mid 30s, I want to say. So, there's a lot of education that needs to happen, you know, for both the American society in general, and especially those who, are Black descendants, because we just weren't taught a lot of this stuff. It should be like we should treat this information like our fellow brothers and sisters over in the Jewish community, right? How
Right.
they
Right.
preserve and they appreciate, preserving their information. And I think we're starting to get better at it. I think we're starting to really try to understand, like what happened, why we didn't get compensated, why we didn't get land, why our ancestors, for the most part, didn't get repair, especially those, their constituents, their white counterparts, because those same harms are still happening today, just in a different manner, maybe not as overt, maybe a little bit more subtle, but hey, bottom line, America works on cash, works on money. It's a capitalistic system, and if you don't have any capital, you're done.
Stick a fork in ya.
Yeah, so yes, it's education, and that will help with the shame of it all. Absolutely. And want to obviously thank Darlene. All her steadfast, she's always steadfast, and she's always just down and willing to learn and teach. Always love to hear a teaching moment from our good sister Darlene as well, who is associate producer on the Reparations Now documentary. So appreciate all her effort as we move into the future of not only us, but our children, their children, their children. So I think that's about it. Should we put up the very last slide before we go out?
Let's see here. All right.
So we are proposing Reparations Day be August 7th, because on this day we're going to stand on the shoulders of those whom stood for justice and equity as we continue in their legacy. If you didn't listen, I hope everybody listened, that the ex-pension slave was founded on August 7th by the good ancestors, Callie Guy House and Isaiah H. Dickerson, on August 7th. So just putting it out there. I think I heard or researched there might be another Reparations Awareness Day. I'm not too sure what's kind of going on that. There's nothing official out there right now. So I'm just proposing this day, that this be the day that we celebrate. So that's it. Just putting it out there for the family. Just want to get some feedback.
And this other day that's floating around that you mentioned, what was it? June 25th or?
Might as well be. I don't know. I think it was February 25th. I want to say. I think it's called Reparations Awareness Day.
Where did you find that information?
I found it online somewhere. I think in Cobra may have been celebrating it, but I don't think it's like an official thing. It's not well known from my understanding. I couldn't find, if anybody out there knows the meaning for February 25th, please let me know. I couldn't find anything else on it. But for me, I chose August 7th just because this was the founding, of our ancestors who, established, what was established on August 7th. So that's what I'm proposing. I hope everyone is willing to celebrate Reparations Day as well on August 7th, starting this year.
All right, August 7th, 2023.
Now, I don't know what y'all gonna do on that day. I guess that's up to you. But, we got to start the tradition somewhere, right? So, and it does have a meaning, just in my humble opinion. But I think that's it. Kim, do you want to put the flyer up once again for the June 29th, and then we'll...
Oh. I keep going back to this. I mean, you did a really good job on that.
Oh, yeah. We can keep that one up, too.
No, we'll go back to the 29th because that is what we are pushing for. If you are anywhere near Sacramento, or, even if you want to come on into Sacramento, this is the final hearing, and we want y'all all in the house.
Definitely. Come through. And
make history.
Yeah, make history. I was gonna say enjoy it while it lasted. Because the struggle still continues, right?
The struggle still continues.
The task force, California Reparations Task Force, has and will have or had a huge lift in responsibility.
Right.
And I know there was a lot of mudslinging at them. So, hey, but I thought everybody
did a fabulous job, and now we're
everybody did a
looking
fabulous
forward
job,
to this final report and going into what I call the legislative leg of this race or process, where we're working on legislation and getting it passed through.
Yeah. That is the next step.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We'll see. I mean, I think, some of us know better than others about the legislative process, but one thing I will say is that you must be aware and get involved. I mean, you have to stay tuned, you have to stay engaged, right? There's just no excuse. I think especially in the last years with this whole reparations process, a lot of us have been better informed about the legislative process, right? Which is, I think we do as a people need to get more politically educated. Fam, straight up.
For sure, but this
41,
it's reached critical mass. We need all hands on deck. So,
all hands on deck. So on that note, for those in the replay that will check this out once again, if you want to, please like, share, and subscribe, and then leave comments. Please leave comments
and hit the bell for notifications, because like I said, we need you.
Facts. And I'm gonna put the Reparations Now documentary link in there one more time. Go ahead and pre-order right now. You can be the first in the building. Pre-order and watch this, what I hopefully will feel be a very informative educational tool that you can use for you and your family. And
right, it's a great way to inform them, raise awareness about reparation, what's going on out here in California.
Absolutely. And we're probably going to end up putting more footage. The documentary is about 2 hours and 18 minutes. I mean, we have so much footage that it just got ridiculous. I had to do, a cut. Kim was like, we got to cut it. We got to cut it.
It was like a 6-hour movie. I'm like, you're going to have to cut this now, bruh.
Yeah, it was 6 hours. Yeah, we have so much footage. But yeah, we're probably going to be putting some behind the scenes, some interview stuff on the website. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how, people respond. But regardless, we'll just put stuff, some behind the scenes on that particular website. We're not going to be putting up on YouTube because we feel like that this information should be, valued. Not saying that we don't value YouTube, etc., but and I also think that there's also some behind the scenes stuff that maybe necessarily shouldn't go up on YouTube for everybody. So
yeah, probably not.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there that's pretty straightforward in there. So we're gonna leave that to the reparationsnow.com. And also before we go, want to really shout out and thank everybody who did participate in it. Can't thank everybody enough who did the interviews. I mean, got to thank Camila Moore, obviously, who participated in the documentary. Dr. Javon Scott Lewis indirectly participated in it. Shout out to Donald Tamaki or Don Tamaki, right? He came through a couple times, participated in our community sessions. Everybody, just shout out to everybody who was in it else. Les Robinson was in it. Keisha Matthews talked about real estate. We had Jonathan Burgess, the Coloma family up there. Then can't forget about John, and I can't believe John Pope, who's down, and he's a historian down in Allensworth. And can't forget about Al Bearden up in Weed, who we had the honor to interview. And also one of my friend's father, who I had no idea at all growing up how instrumental he was in the boycotts up in Weed, when blacks were being left out of jobs. And his name is Willie Walker. So he was giving some good information. So we were just very fortunate in coming together to put this Reparations Now documentary. Crossing fingers, hopefully we'll be able to do it in other states. I don't want to put the cat out the bag already, but there's a couple of states, I think, in the South that we definitely want to hit up, and I'm trying to figure why. I know for sure, there's been some documentaries out there right now, but we want to kind of keep it more contemporary.
Yeah, this is, happening right now, past, present, and future of reparations.
Facts. All right, family, so go check it out, reparationsnow.com. We'll see you on June 29th, 2023. If not in the building, then at least in the building virtually.
For sure. And if we don't see you before, happy Juneteenth.
Yes, family. Happy Juneteenth. And on that note, family, peace and reparations.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but freed people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations.
They had no idea that that church I was running back every day was something my grandfather established.
This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Overnight, it's like, oh, it's no longer the quarters, now it's Lincoln Heights. Oh, so now we get to use Abraham Lincoln for our name. And you think about all the other people that they could have used, but they picked Lincoln. And I think that's sort of a stereotypical of what they do.
There wasn't any black restaurants. As far as black business and weed, it wasn't none.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Why has it been easier for other groups than us?
Because of anti-black hatred.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR room, don't tune in.